The wind screamed across the frozen plains of Tessara 9, slamming against the metal walls of Outpost 47. Inside, the control room was dimly lit, the only warmth coming from the low hum of machinery and the soft blue glow of a holofeed. Mike Turner leaned back in his chair, his hands rough and scarred from years of service. On the hologram screen, his teenage daughter Ellie smiled brightly, her image flickering through the static. "Come on, Dad," she teased. "It is your birthday. You are not allowed to look this miserable." Mike chuckled faintly. "I am fine, kiddo. Just another rotation, same as any other. Storm season keeps me busy." Ellie held up a small plate with a crooked chocolate cake, a single flickering candle at its center. "I made this for you. I know you cannot taste it through the screen, but pretend." He smiled softly, his eyes tired but kind. "That looks perfect, Elle. Just promise me you will eat it for me." She grinned. "Only if you promise to actually sleep tonight." Before he could answer, a sharp, shrill tone cut through the air. The console lights flashed red. Incoming distress signal. Mike's smile vanished. "Hold on," he muttered, typing commands rapidly. "Signal source. Canyon Ridge, 6 clicks north. Could be debris from a mining skiff." Ellie's face grew concerned. "Dad, do not go out there. The storm is bad tonight." "I have to check," he said, reaching for his rifle and parka. "Could be survivors." The wind roared as the outpost doors opened, icy air blasting his face. He turned back to the holofeed once more. "I will call you when I get back, sweetheart. Promise?" He gave her a faint smile. "Always?" Then he was gone, swallowed by the storm. The hover sled whined as it skimmed across the frozen ground. Visibility was nearly zero. Snow whipped across his visor like shards of glass. The distress beacon pulsed faintly ahead, cutting through the white chaos. When he reached the canyon edge, his heart stopped. Below, half buried in ice, was a small transport craft. Alien design, its hull cracked and smoking. He parked the sled and climbed down, boots sinking into the snow. The smell of scorched metal filled the air. The ship's door hung open, twisted from impact. "Anyone alive in there?" He shouted over the wind. A faint sound answered. Not human. A child's whimper. Mike ducked through the doorway, scanning with his flashlight. Wreckage everywhere, and then he saw her. A woman lay on the floor, silver skin shimmering faintly beneath torn clothing, her body protecting a small child. Her breathing was ragged, her arm wrapped around the boy. A faint blue glow pulsed along veins beneath her skin. Bioluminescence, gentle but otherworldly. The boy, no older than 5, looked up with wide turquoise eyes, clutching a glowing pendant to his chest. When Mike stepped closer, the woman stirred. Her eyes opened, the same bright turquoise as her child's, glowing faintly in the dark. She raised a trembling hand holding a small blaster. "Stay back," she rasped, her voice musical yet fierce. "Touch him and I will—" "I am not here to hurt you," Mike said calmly, raising both hands. "I am human. You crashed near my outpost. Let me help." Her vision blurred. The blaster wavered. "No, they will find us." Then her eyes rolled back and she collapsed. Mike caught her before she hit the ground. She was lighter than he expected, her skin strangely cool to the touch. The boy cried softly, pressing against his mother's shoulder. "It is all right, kid," Mike said quietly. "You are safe now." He lifted the woman into his arms and nodded toward the child. "Come on, follow me. We have to move." Outside, the storm screamed like a living thing. Snow clawed at their faces as he carried her back to the sled, the boy clutching his coat tightly. As the hover sled sped toward Outpost 47, the wreckage vanished behind them, swallowed by white and wind. But Mike felt it in his bones. Whatever he had just found out there in the storm was not a simple rescue. It was the beginning of something that would change everything. By the time Mike reached Outpost 47, the blizzard had grown into a white wall of rage. The wind howled like a living beast and snow clawed at his coat as he carried the unconscious alien woman inside. The child clung to him silently, shivering, eyes wide and bright against the storm's darkness. The heavy metal door sealed behind them with a hiss. Warmth slowly returned to the room, though the air was thick with tension. Mike lowered the woman onto a medical cot near the heater. "Easy now," he murmured. "You are safe." The boy stayed close, gripping the strange pendant around his neck as if it were life itself. His breathing came in sharp, frightened bursts. Mike rummaged through a drawer for the med scanner. He had seen wounds like these before, fractures, burns, shrapnel. Nothing a standard field kit could not handle. Hold still, he said, pressing the scanner over her chest. A soft green light bathed her silver skin. Readouts scrolled across the display. 2 hearts, different oxygen ratio, alien physiology but close enough for human stabilizers. He injected a mild coagulant and cleaned the wounds with steady hands. The glowing lines on her skin dimmed as her breathing slowed to something calmer, steadier. The boy's voice trembled. Will my mother live? Mike looked at him gently. She will. She just needs rest. The boy nodded, but his eyes never left her face. He looked too young to understand fear, yet old enough to know loss. Hours passed. The storm raged outside like it wanted to tear the walls apart. Inside, the outpost hummed softly. Heaters buzzing, sensors blinking, wind battering the metal roof. Mike sat in his chair, rifle nearby, watching the alien woman sleep. There was something haunting about her. Even wounded, her presence filled the room. Her skin glowed faintly with every breath, the light moving under her skin like liquid silver. When she finally stirred, the glow brightened, her eyes snapping open. For a moment she looked lost, then her gaze found him, sharp and alert. "Where is my son?" she demanded, her voice hoarse. "He is right here," Mike said, motioning to the small figure sleeping on the cot beside her. "He has not left your side." Her expression softened. Relief flickered across her face, but it vanished quickly behind caution. She tried to sit up, wincing in pain. "You should not move," Mike said firmly. "You are still healing." She looked around the small outpost, the metal walls, the humming consoles, the faint orange light from the heater. Her voice lowered, wary. "Why did you bring us here?" "You would have died out there," he replied simply. "That is reason enough." She studied him in silence. Her eyes were striking, filled with an emotion he could not name, fear, suspicion, and something else. Finally, she spoke again. "You should not have helped me." "They will come." "Who?" She hesitated, then turned her face away. "You would not believe me. Try me." Her lips tightened. "Bounty hunters. They hunt me and my child. If they find us here, you will die too." Mike leaned back, his jaw tightening. "Let them try." The room fell silent. The only sound the whisper of wind outside. Later, as she rested again, Mike brewed synthetic coffee and sat near the heater. The smell filled the small room, mingling with the faint metallic scent of alien blood. He glanced toward her and spoke quietly, more to himself than to her. "I have seen worse odds." To his surprise, her voice came softly from the cot. "You were a soldier," he nodded. "Once, Federation Army, border conflicts. Retired after my wife passed. Now I keep the weather reports running. Not much glory in that." She turned her head slightly, studying him with unreadable eyes. "You risked your life for strangers. That sounds like a soldier still." He smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe I am just tired of losing people." Silence hung between them for a while, heavy but not cold. When he looked again, she had drifted back to sleep. The boy stirred beside her, curling against her arm, clutching the glowing pendant tighter. Mike watched them, feeling something shift inside him. He had been alone for too long. His daughter light years away, his world reduced to reports, storms, and silence. But tonight there was something different in the air. Outside, lightning rolled through the snow clouds, painting the ice fields blue. Inside, in the dim light, a fugitive mother and her child slept beneath his roof. And for the first time in years, Mike Turner did not feel completely alone. He leaned back in his chair, whispering to himself, "Happy birthday, old man." And in the distance, beyond the storm, unseen shapes moved through the clouds, ships without transponders. Hunting in silence, the peace would not last. The storm eased by morning, but the silence that followed was heavy and unnatural. The air outside the outpost was still and sharp, the kind of cold that made metal creak and breath hang like smoke. Inside, Mike ran diagnostics on the radar grid. The console flickered, lines of data streaming by, but something was wrong. A faint signal pulsed at the edge of the scan. It was moving. He frowned. That should not be there. Lyra stood behind him, wrapped in a gray thermal blanket, her silver skin dull in the low light. Her eyes narrowed at the screen. "They have found us." Mike turned. "You are sure?" She nodded slowly, one hand clutching the pendant that hung from her neck now, twin to the one her son wore. "They follow that frequency. My ship's distress beacon was damaged, but it still sends fragments. They will not stop until they find us." Mike's jaw tightened. "How long do we have?" "Not long," she said quietly. They travel in pairs, hunters never hunt alone. Mike shut down the radar feed and stood, his movements sharp and deliberate. Then we make them regret coming here. Lyra blinked. You cannot fight them alone. I will not be alone, he said, looking at her and the boy. This outpost may be old, but I can make it bite. He moved fast, setting up barriers, locking hatches, pulling power to the defense grid. The hum of machinery filled the room as the systems came alive for the first time in years. He scavenged from the repair bay, sensor mines, shock traps, even an old auto turret that he patched together with half a battery and hope. Lyra watched him quietly, holding her son close. The boy Aaron stared up at Mike with wide eyes. Will you stop them? He asked softly. I will try, Mike said, but you and your mother need to stay hidden. He led them to a sub-level bunker, an old storage bay carved into the rock below the outpost. It was small, lined with supplies and dim emergency lights. Stay here, he said. No matter what you hear, do not come out until I say. Lyra caught his arm before he turned away. Her hand was cold but strong. Why do this for us? She asked. He looked at her, the lines in his face deep in the dim light. Because someone once did it for me. Above, the outpost sensors chirped, a soft tone at first, then a shrill warning. Incoming ships. Mike sprinted to the control room. Through the frost-covered window, two black shapes descended through the clouds, sleek, predatory, the kind of ships built for killing. He grabbed his rifle, steadied his breathing, and muttered, Here we go. The ships landed in the snow with a low roar, throwing up plumes of white. Figures emerged, 3 of them, tall and armored, faces hidden behind helmets that glowed faint red through the stormlight. One carried a scanner. Another dragged a long, serrated weapon across the ice. Mike opened a comm channel. You are trespassing on Federation monitoring property, he said calmly. Identify yourselves. The response was a burst of static, then a cold, mechanical voice. Surrender the fugitives. You have one chance. Mike's hand hovered over the manual power switch. No fugitives here. Only me, lying, the voice hissed. Scan confirms life signs, non-human. Mike flipped the switch. The outer defense grid came alive, crackling arcs of energy dancing across the snow. One hunter raised his weapon, but too late. The ground erupted beneath him, tossing him back in a cloud of white and fire. Gunfire followed, sharp bursts echoing through the frozen air. Mike ducked behind a bulkhead and fired controlled shots through a narrow slit window. One of the hunters fell, armor smoking. The others advanced. Sparks flew as bullets slammed against the outer wall. The entire outpost shook with each impact. Below, Lyra held her son close, her eyes glowing faintly as fear rippled through her. She could feel the vibrations, the distant gunfire. Her hands trembled, but not from weakness. Something stirred beneath her skin, a pulse of raw energy she had spent years trying to bury. She looked at Aaron. Stay here, she whispered. He shook his head. Mother, do not go. But she was already moving, her steps silent and steady. Above, one of the hunters breached the side hatch, bursting into the corridor. Mike turned too late. The attacker was fast, towering over him, rifle raised. Then a flash of blue light filled the hallway. The hunter froze mid-step, his weapon sparking violently before he was hurled backward by an invisible force. His armor smoked as he hit the far wall with a metallic crash. Mike blinked against the light, eyes widening. Lyra stood at the corridor's end, her hand outstretched, eyes glowing bright turquoise. Blue veins of energy pulsed under her skin, the same glow reflected in the pendant at her throat. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then her knees buckled. Mike caught her before she fell. What was that? Her breath came shallow. The reason they want us, she whispered. They made me into this. I cannot control it for long. He helped her stand, steadying her. Then we end this fast. She looked up at him, a trace of sadness in her eyes. You are a fool, human. He gave a small, tired smile. Maybe, but I am your fool now. The wind screamed outside. Another ship was descending. More hunters were coming, and Mike Turner, the man who once wanted nothing more than to survive one quiet birthday, loaded his last magazine and looked toward the door. Let them come, he said. The night was far from over. The night sank deep and cold over Tessara 9, blanketing the outpost in silence once more. The wrecked hunter ships lay scattered across the snowfields like broken claws, their fires slowly dying in the wind. Inside, the air smelled of smoke, ozone, and scorched metal. Emergency lights flickered along the ceiling, painting the control room in dull red and shadow. Mike leaned against the wall, reloading his rifle with hands that trembled from exhaustion. The adrenaline had begun to fade, leaving behind the raw ache of wounds and the hollow weight of what had just happened. Lyra sat across from him on a metal crate, her silver skin faintly glowing under the flickering lights. She looked fragile now, drained, her hair, long and silken, clung to her face, and faint burn marks marred her arms where the energy had poured from her body. Her son, Aaron, slept wrapped in a blanket near the heater, his breathing steady. "You saved us," Mike said quietly, his voice rough. Lyra lifted her gaze, meeting his eyes. "No," she whispered. "You saved me first. I only returned what you gave." Mike managed a faint smile, though his ribs protested when he breathed too deeply. "Seems like we make a good team." Lyra's eyes softened. "You are strange, human. You fight without knowing who I am, without knowing what danger I bring." "Why?" He shrugged lightly. "Because it was right. Because no one deserves to die alone in the snow." Her head tilted slightly, studying him. "You speak as if you know what that feels like." He chuckled, low and tired. "Maybe I do." For a moment, neither spoke. Only the soft hum of the heater filled the silence. Finally, Mike pushed off the wall and walked toward her. "Your power," he said. "That light, what is it exactly?" Lyra hesitated, her hands tightening around the blanket. "I was a scientist for the Vereen Dominion. We studied hybrid physiology, energy drawn from living cells. When I learned they were using my research to create soldiers, I destroyed my lab and fled. They called it treason." She glanced at her sleeping son. "Aaron was born with the same energy, but his is unstable. The crystal he carries helps him control it. Without it," her voice trailed off, shaking. "Without it, he could burn himself alive." Mike listened in silence, the weight of her words sinking in. He had seen war, but this was something else, an empire that weaponized children. He said softly, "Then we protect him. Both of you." Lyra's lips parted slightly as if she wanted to argue, but she saw the resolve in his eyes and said nothing. Instead, she whispered, "You are a stubborn man." "I have been called worse," he said with a faint grin. A flicker of amusement touched her expression for the first time, and it was like light breaking through the storm. Hours passed. The storm outside grew harsher, howling against the walls. The outpost shuddered with every gust. Mike and Lyra sat near the heater, too tired to speak, too awake to rest. After a while, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your daughter, Ellie, she is the one who called earlier." Mike nodded. "Yeah, she is 17 now. Lives on the main colony with her aunt. Smart kid, smarter than me. She must miss you." He stared into the flickering light. "She does. But she understands why I stay here. Someone has to monitor the storms. The Federation pays well enough for her education." Lyra looked at him, her eyes reflecting the soft orange glow. "And your wife?" He was silent for a long time before answering. "She was killed during a colony raid. Pirates hit a transport she was on. I was off-world. Could not do anything." Lyra lowered her gaze. "I am sorry." He nodded slowly. "After that, I stopped fighting wars for other people. Thought maybe if I just stayed out here, I could stop losing anyone else." She reached across the small space between them, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Her touch was cool but gentle. "You did not lose everyone. You saved us." Mike looked down at her hand, then at her face. Her expression was soft, fragile, yet steady. "Maybe," he said quietly. "Maybe that means something." The heater crackled, throwing sparks that danced in the dim air. For a long while they sat in silence, the storm whispering beyond the walls. And somewhere in that quiet, the distance between them closed, not in words, but in the soft understanding that two broken souls had found something to hold on to. When Lyra's head finally rested lightly against his shoulder, Mike did not move. Her bioluminescent markings pulsed faintly in time with her slow breathing, dimming until they became no more than faint traces of light. He whispered, more to himself than to her, "Rest while you can. Tomorrow we fight again." She did not answer. She had already fallen asleep. Outside, unseen through the swirling snow, more ships cut silently through the clouds, dark shapes against the stars. The hunters had sent word. Reinforcements were coming. But for this one fragile night, warmth and peace held steady inside the outpost. For this one night, A lonely human soldier and a fugitive alien mother shared something the galaxy could not take. Quiet, fragile hope. The dawn came pale and broken over the frozen plains, fleeting faint gold light across the jagged ice. The storm had calmed, but the silence it left behind was heavy, unnatural. Mike was up before the others, scanning the sensors, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Static hissed across the monitor, but then movement. 6, maybe 7 heat signatures closing fast from the east. His jaw tightened. "They found us," he muttered. He turned toward Lyra, who stood by the heater, still pale but alert, her eyes narrowing at the alarm beeping softly. "They are not giving up," she said. Chamber on his rifle. "They never do." He glanced at Aaron, still asleep in the corner. For a brief moment, Mike hesitated. He had promised Ellie he would come home soon. He had promised he was done with wars. But looking at that sleeping boy, innocent, trembling, breathing softly in the cold, he knew he could not run. Lyra stepped closer, her voice low but firm. "You should take your daughter's shuttle and leave. I can draw them away." Mike looked at her sharply. "Not a chance." "I am not abandoning you." She stared at him, surprised by the heat in his tone. "You think I would just walk away?" he continued. "You and that kid came to me for help. And now you are part of this outpost, part of my home. That means I stand with you." Her lips parted, and for a heartbeat she said nothing. Then she nodded slowly, her eyes shimmering faintly with that strange inner light. "Then we stand together." Outside, the snow groaned under the landing struts of the bounty ships. Dark figures emerged through the mist, armored and armed. Mercenaries with crimson visors and rifles that gleamed in the pale dawn. Mike sealed the main hatch, locking down the corridors. The hum of defense shields echoed through the structure. "All right," he said, handing Lyra a spare blaster. "We hold them here. You watch the north side, I will cover the entrance." Lyra hesitated, gripping the weapon with uncertain hands. "I am not trained for this." He met her eyes. "You are stronger than you think." She blinked once, then nodded. The first explosion shook the ground, sending cracks spidering through the frost-covered windows. Then another. The hunters were cutting through the perimeter. "Here we go," Mike whispered. The walls rattled as the door blew inward, a burst of red smoke flooding the corridor. Figures poured in, 3, maybe 4. Mike opened fire, shots ringing out like thunder in the metal halls. 2 went down instantly. A third hurled a grenade, but Mike dove behind a console, shielding his head as the blast tore through the room. "Lyra!" he shouted. From the far side of the corridor came a flash of silver light. Lyra stepped out, her markings blazing brighter than before. Energy coiled around her hands, flaring in luminous arcs. She lifted her arms, and a wave of biotic force slammed into the attackers, throwing them against the wall like rag dolls. She gasped, staggering to one knee. Mike rushed to her side. "Easy," he said, gripping her shoulders. "Save your strength." Her breathing was shaky. "They will keep coming. Then we make them regret it." Hours blurred into chaos. Smoke filled the outpost. Walls cracked, flames spread, and the snow outside glowed red from the burning ships. Aaron huddled in the bunker as Mike and Lyra fought room to room, he with cold precision, she with desperate power. At last, one of the hunters breached the sublevel. Mike saw the door blow open, and in that split second, Aaron's terrified cry pierced the chaos. Mike turned, sprinting through the debris. He reached the hallway just as a bounty soldier raised his rifle toward the boy. Without thinking, Mike threw himself forward. The shot rang out. Pain exploded through his side as he tackled the attacker to the floor, driving a blade through the man's armor. Blood soaked the snow beneath him. "Mike!" Lyra screamed, her voice breaking. He tried to stand, but his knees buckled. The world tilted, blurred. Lyra knelt beside him, shaking, fury and fear igniting in her eyes. "Stay still," she whispered. "Protect him," Mike rasped. "Promise me." But before he could finish, the air around her began to shimmer. The markings on her skin flared with blinding light, pulsing like a living flame. The hunters closed in, but Lyra stood, her entire body aglow, her voice echoing like thunder. "You will not touch them." Then the world erupted. A wave of white-blue energy blasted outward, ripping through metal, snow, and fire alike. The hunters were thrown back, their ships collapsing in on themselves as if crushed by an invisible hand. When the light faded, silence returned. Only the wind remained. Lyra fell to her knees beside Mike, trembling violently. The glow dimmed from her skin, leaving her pale and spent. He opened his eyes, faint but alive. "You did it," he whispered. Her tears fell silently onto his face. "No," she said softly. "We did. The outpost was ruined." Smoke drifted into the pale morning sky. But amid the wreckage, the three of them were alive, broken, bleeding, but breathing. Mike leaned weakly against the shattered wall, his arm around Aaron while Lyra sat beside him, her hand gripping his tightly. For the first time in years, Mike Turner, soldier, father, widower, felt something more powerful than fear or grief, hope, and he was not alone anymore. The storm had finally passed. Days drifted by in quiet stillness, as if Tessara 9 itself was holding its breath after the violence. The wind softened, the sky cleared, and the first sunrise in weeks painted the ice fields in gold and rose. The outpost, once cold and gray, now glowed with gentle warmth from the makeshift heaters Lyra had repaired. Inside, Mike sat at the edge of a cot, his side bandaged tight, exhaustion etched into his features. Every breath still hurt, but he was alive. Across from him, Lyra carefully poured a cup of steaming synth tea, her movement slow, almost reverent. "You should rest," she said softly. Her voice had changed, no longer cold or guarded, but gentle, carrying a warmth that felt new. Mike smiled faintly. "You sound like my daughter." Lyra glanced at him, a small, uncertain smile tugging at her lips. "Then she must be very wise." He chuckled quietly, the sound low and rough. Too wise for her old man. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The soft hum of the heater filled the room. Aaron slept peacefully in a blanket pile, his small hands curled around his pendant. His breathing was calm, no longer shallow or afraid. Lyra watched him for a moment, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "He has not slept this soundly since we fled," she whispered. Mike followed her gaze. "He's safe now," her lips trembled. "Because of you." He turned toward her, studying her face, the way the silver tones of her skin caught the sunrise, the way her eyes held both sorrow and gratitude. "You would have done the same for me," he said. She shook her head. "No, I was taught to survive, not to trust." Her gaze dropped to her hands. "You changed that." For a long moment the room felt weightless. Their silence wasn't empty. It was full, alive, carrying everything they could not yet say aloud. Then, the sound of engines echoed in the distance. Mike stiffened. Lyra's hand instinctively reached for her son. "It's all right," he said, pulling up the scanner feed. "It's friendly. Colony shuttle." A wave of static cleared, and then a familiar voice broke through the channel. Soft, trembling, and achingly human. "Dad? This is Ellie. Please respond." Oh God, Dad, are you there?" Mike exhaled shakily, relief flooding through him. "I'm here, kiddo." "I'm right here," her voice cracked. "I thought you were gone." "The colony lost your signal during the storm." "Yeah," he said, his throat thick. "Had a bit of company. You'll want to meet them." When the shuttle landed outside, the hatch hissed open and Ellie ran across the snow, wrapped in a heavy coat, her breath steaming in the cold air. She froze when she saw the ruined outpost and the silver-skinned woman standing beside her father. "Ellie," Mike said gently, limping forward. "This is Lyra, and the little guy is Aaron." The girl's eyes widened, unsure, but she smiled anyway, the way only a daughter raised by a good man could. "You saved my dad, didn't you?" Lyra hesitated. "He saved us," she said softly. Ellie turned back to her father, tears shining in her eyes. "You missed your birthday dinner again, you know." Mike laughed, though it came out more like a breathless sigh. "Yeah, guess I had a few distractions." He glanced toward the small table inside the outpost where a half-melted cake still sat, the one Ellie had shown him over holocall. Somehow, through all the chaos, it had survived, a little crooked but still there. Ellie noticed it too and smiled faintly. "You actually saved it?" Mike shrugged. "Didn't seem right to let it go to waste." She grinned, brushing the snow from his jacket. "You really are impossible." Later, the colony officials arrived, scanning the wreckage and recording reports. They questioned Lyra briefly, offering her transport and asylum under the Interstellar Protection Accord. Lyra stood quietly as they spoke, her gaze drifting to Mike, who was leaning against a railing, talking softly with his daughter. When the officer asked if she wished to leave with them, she didn't hesitate. "No," she said, her voice calm but firm. "My place is here." The officer looked surprised. "With him?" Lyra nodded once. "With him, and with his family." Mike blinked, caught off guard, but he didn't argue. He simply met her eyes, and for the first time since his wife's death, something deep inside him stirred again, something warm and real and alive. That evening, they gathered around the heater as the sun dipped below the ice plains. Ellie and Aaron chased each other through the snow outside, their laughter echoing across the cold air. Inside, Mike sat beside Lyra, sharing the last of the salvaged food. The air smelled faintly of warmth and life, something that had been missing for years. Lyra watched the children play, her smile soft. "They look happy." "They are," Mike said quietly. "Because they feel safe." She turned toward him. "And you?" He met her gaze, his voice low. "For the first time in a long while, yeah. I think I am." A faint blush shimmered across her silver skin. She looked down at her hands, then back at him. "I do not know what tomorrow brings, but if I am to face it, I would rather not face it alone." Mike reached over, his rough hand closing around hers. "You won't." Outside, Ellie shouted something and threw a handful of snow at Aaron, who squealed in delight. The two of them collapsed laughing, their voices carried away by the wind. Mike and Lyra stood at the doorway watching them. The air was crisp, the sky alive with streaks of orange and violet. For once, the cold didn't bite. Between them sat the birthday cake, melted, imperfect, but still sweet. Mike lit a small candle, shielding it from the breeze. Lyra tilted her head, curious. "A ritual?" he smiled. "A tradition." He nodded toward her. "Make a wish." Her eyes shimmered in the dying light. "I already have one," she said softly. "And I think it came true." He looked at her, then at the horizon where two moons hung side by side, casting their glow over the frozen world. For the first time in years, Mike Turner smiled, a real smile, one that reached his eyes. Not because he had survived another mission, not because duty demanded it, but because, against all odds, he had found something worth living for again: love, family, and peace. The fire crackled softly behind them, and the night settled in warm and still. And somewhere, far above Tessera 9, the stars seemed just a little brighter,